Hello, my friends. I hope you're having a fantastic week so far. This week, I wanted to share an exciting interview I had a couple of weeks ago with Tom Hadley. Now, Tom runs Sufu Marketing, and we talked about AI, we talked about marketing, we talked about value adds within content as well. So I'm going to stop nattering. I'm going to hand over to the interview. I'll see you in just a moment. Thank you for coming back, and enjoy this interview. I'll see you in just a sec.
Hi, Carlton. Great to be here. Thank you for inviting me on. Hello to all the listeners. My name is Tom Hadley, and my business is called Sufu, and I work in the world of branding, but I come at it from a rather different perspective to a lot of other people. My particular interest is marrying up the world of brand with my interest in psychology, and particularly in behavioral psychology, and approaching brand from that point of view, with the ultimate aim of making people persuasive.
Yes. Thank you very much, Tom, for the time. Really appreciate it. You've been on the show before, and it did really well.
I have.
And really selfishly, that's why I wanted you back. There you go.
Well, thank you. It's lovely to be invited back.
There's the honest truth. But we also share, that I've just worked out, a very interesting kind of synergy, which I want to throw in because it's a really exciting one for marketing purposes and branding perception and being persuasive, etc., which is the psychology around doing so, right? Which I kind of had a suspicion we had a common interest in, but now I know 100% that we do. So great, fantastic. But how did you, I guess in some ways the question there though, for the listeners who don't know, is how does that work, right? Because we sit here from a psychological point of view and go, well, if you do this, it has this action. But I don't think some people necessarily appreciate, because there's this concept of like meaningful choice, right? Like we have this idea of meaningful choice, we can make our own choice, and of course, yes, we can, but I think some people don't appreciate the amount of influence that they have been influenced by just in their day-to-day lives, right?
Absolutely. Yes, it's the science of the human brain is still an ongoing work, and something that has changed quite a lot in relatively recent times. I think there was a great deal of work done on humanity understanding itself back perhaps in the Victorian era, and you've got a whole sort of the first generation of psychologists and psychiatrists kind of come in a period kind of from sort of probably the late kind of 1870s 1880s through to perhaps sort of the 1940s. So there's a whole sort of and that's lots of people, Freud and all those sorts of people, and so there's a kind of initial wave, and then a lot of that work, it's not wrong. All this kind of psychology stuff, a lot of it is partial truth, and it's as good a way as people have got of explaining how our brains work. But that's been refined subsequently by applying it to other things. So originally it was all very much kind of like meaning of life kind of stuff, Freud's kind of the id, the ego, the super ego, and what's going on, and that's really kind of what's going on inside your own brain to try and figure yourself out. But then of course, once economics, for example, became a bit more advanced, people started looking at, well, how does how we think and how we feel and how we are sort of triggered by things, how does that apply to economic things, and that's marketing. How do we and the world of advertising in particular, once we had the technological means to broadcast to large numbers of people, then the immediate question was, well, how do you do that persuasively? And so the world of advertising, and if for anybody who's seen the TV series Mad Men, that's a very fun look at how that was first done very successfully in the 1950s and 60s, in terms of persuading large numbers of people on the sorts of things that they might want to buy. So it all sort of stems from there, but it's really a relatively recent post World War II thing.
And I think it's a really interesting conversation point, but there is also commercial opportunities within it, of course, right? Which is in crux, actually, the ability to sell without selling, right? Is the crux of what we're talking about here, right? Which is actually, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what brand is. That's in a nutshell what brand is, really. It's the ability to gain market perception upon what you do, and that you are good at what you do, and you are qualified and or credibility driven in what you do.
I mean, there's a couple of ways that I mean, the way that I personally, there's lots of ways. I mean, we can probably, just for the benefit of people, throw out some different points of view on this, just to give people, and people will find what resonates with them. I mean, there's a very famous Jeff Bezos quote about brand, which is, brand is what other people say about you when you're not in the room, which is helpful to a point, because it makes you stop and think that brand isn't all about us. It's not about who we want to be and what we want to project, push out to other people. So if you think about it from that sort of Bezos quote, that makes you think, oh, okay, actually, it's about how other people feel about us. So that's one important thing. But it is still about us. And I suppose, very simply, I think about it as being the quality of a connection at a very, very fundamental, basic level. It's about me, for example, having an idea, a feeling, a belief, and putting it out there, and you as a person being able to accept that and find commonality with that, such that you and I are then on the same page about whatever it is. And that could be about anything. And that's how it is, very fundamentally human. It's how we make friends. It's how we form relationships. It's how we, interact with our families.
Well, it's how you build trust and rapport, right? Like this is the crux of building trust and rapport. And
so it's an extension of that. In terms of, a brand saying, well, I want you to love this brand as much as you love other things, people and pets and other things in your life. How do you use those same sorts of techniques to feel that sort of way? And of course, that is something that's very much about modern life, is that modern life has changed, and we now measure a lot of our life around brands and commercial things and things that we own, and what that says about us, what that says about our status in life, in a way that, pre-capitalism, we didn't really have those sorts of metrics. We were more concerned about how people felt about us and what family was like in the community around us and those sorts of things. But, we've all become more defined by consumerism.
I think it also kind of leans into what used to be the social graphs on socials, which was like, how well known am I? E.g., how many likes, followers, shares, etc., etc. How many vanity messages do I have on the thing, whatever it may be, the piece of content, etc. But I think there's a difference, and what we talk about a lot, as you know, and I'm sure you talk about it as well, to clients, is like, actually be careful with how much you care about those, because some of the time you need to care. Yes. If you're trying to get awareness around what you're doing and you're like, hey, look at me, to a new audience, sure, absolutely, you need to care about those numbers and you need to look at those metrics. However, if that's not the purpose of that piece of content, that etc., whatever that may be, then actually it matters less, personally. And I was having a conversation this morning about this exact thing, where we were talking about the shift in regards to opportunity, which is the shift from most social media platforms moving from a social graph perspective, e.g. who follows you, who likes you, who shares you, etc., to an interest graph, e.g. what do I actually care about and what content do I actually want to consume. And
this is how TikTok's algorithm is different from
yes.
all the historic ones.
Yes, which ironically now all the historic ones are like, that's a better algorithm, let's do that, we're going to do that instead.
Well, better for who, I suppose, is the question, because I'm quite algorithm cynical, because ultimately, this is the interesting thing about metrics and about logic and about these different worlds. I very much live in this world of the psychological. That's my speciality, because I look at the world of logic, and more these days, I find fault with it, or I find fault, but I find imperfections and I find gaps. I was talking to someone the other day, we were talking about metrics, about social, and about, why they're good, why they're bad, what they tell you, what they don't tell you. And somebody said to me, well, if you could invent a public metric to add to sort of, likes and comments and shares and all that sort of stuff, on a social platform, what would it be? And I said, I'd like mutes as a thing you could see, because we're always out there pushing more and more and more and more and more content out. And the one thing we get the positive metrics. The platforms want us to see the positive metrics. Oh, 14 people liked this. And now, obviously, people did trial dislike buttons on some platforms, and that didn't work out so well. So because people didn't like seeing the dislikes, so that turned people off. But actually, because the problem with a dislike metric is you don't know why. Oh my God, 14 people didn't like it. And I don't know why they didn't like it. So it tells you nothing. Whereas I think it would be an interesting one to go, at what point, what was the piece of content that someone saw and they just went, I just don't want to hear any more of this? What would that teach you? I mean, you'd still have to do a bit of an self-examination, but say, why was it, or is it when I post this sort of stuff, maybe if we kind of get into politics occasionally or something, when I veer off into politics, that seems to be the trigger where people go, I've heard enough now, I'm muting this person or I'm blocking this person or whatever. So, but we never get shown any of those metrics, and we don't get shown them because the social platforms don't want to give us the bad news.
I think in some ways we do get shown them though, because it's indirect, and also it kind of goes back to fundamental marketing, which is you don't want to be everything to everyone, right? Because it's kind of like, it's an interesting idea, but I think also it could work both ways, because some people are just going to say, well, the people muting me aren't my people anyway. They're not my tribe. They're not the people I would connect with, right?
Well, you can make that assumption, but you don't. But this is the thing: you don't. You've got to examine.
Yeah, right? Of course.
You can do it. I mean, obviously there are these sort of unfollow sort of add-ins for Twitter and stuff, so you can actually see who unfollowed you and stuff like that. So you could, if you delve into that data. But I mean, let's face it, who's actually doing that? Who's actually delving into the thing of was it a certain type of person, or was it, are people unfollowing me within a week of following me? Am I losing followers quickly, because I'm not doing what people thought I was doing? Or is it just actually it's after about 3 months, maybe I'm just not being varied enough, and I'm just kind of sounding like a broken record, so people switch off then? I mean, all of this stuff, if we have a genuine spirit of wanting to do this whole world of comms and social and digital better, this is the stuff that's kind of valuable, because in the real world, we get this feedback from people. You can see if you're boring someone, you can see it on their face. But there's none of these things exist in the digital world, and I think it's a shame that we don't get more learning points like that from the social algorithms. But then they're little dopamine machines, so it doesn't help. But all of those sorts of things don't help feed the dopamine machine.
No, that's very true. But I think it is a very interesting point of view, though, that you need to always take, and this is the point I always make, is take your viewership, your likes, your followers, your shares, blah, 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 these vanity metrics with the biggest grain of salt in the world, because you're only seeing the positive perception unless you get a negative comment, right? And even then, take that with a pinch of salt, because is it constructive criticism, or is it someone just venting online because they're faceless, right? But I think, it opens up an interesting conversation around, obviously we know in theory what we're doing, right? We're adapting it all the time, we're looking at the data, etc., of course. But we come from a place of privilege when we talk about brand, right? We both have very well established brands, we know what we're doing with brand, etc. But for those who don't, why is brand important in a interesting market? I'm refusing to use the R word because I don't think it's a positive. I think there's always opportunities, and I think that's my mindset. And I think there's always opportunities if you're willing to go and hunt for them, right? Is it becoming a more difficult market? Perhaps. However, if you're willing to put the work in, you'll be the same. You know what I mean? It will be the same. But just to reiterate the question, what role do you think brand plays in helping actually make that life, that hunting, that ability to have work still and still be profitable exist?
It is very simple. It is communication of value. And I say that's value singular, not values as in brand values, but whatever it is, because as you say, there are always, it doesn't really matter what's going on in the world. There are always parts of an economy that are doing well and parts of an economy that are doing badly, and certain countries that are doing well and certain countries that are doing badly. But fundamentally, whatever your industry segmentation or your geographical segmentation is, there is, to have a successful business, you have to be providing a product or a service that is valuable to somebody such that they wish to perform a commercial transaction with you for it. And so, that's what a brand is about, finding that connection that I talked about earlier, but around the value of something to somebody. And that's, we often get very worried about trying to be all things to all people and trying to have very universal values that appeal to as many people as possible. And often, as you know well, Colin, that is both unnecessary and indeed counterproductive, because it leads to very woolly brand thinking.
And also, can I just add, bloody tiring. Really tiring.
Well, it's. I suppose we all react to it in a different way. I mean, I just find it incredibly boring.
It's that too, but it's just really it's trying to be someone who you're not, and I think that's what's being really important. Is like actually just owning who you are within your brand, and if that alienates people, okay, that's a shame. So sorry. Peace. Is the crux really, because that's people talk to me about this all the time. You swear in content, how dare you? Okay, if that's an issue for you, we're probably not going to work together. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, right? But we're probably not, because I swear on set, I swear in my life. Hence why I don't mute myself in content. I go out my way to swear, sure. And I'm actually arguably one of the most respectful people you'll ever meet. However, I'm not going to just not swear just because, right? Because it's not authentic to me. And that's the point, right? It's about, for me anyway, it's about creating a perception and an understanding of what you are and what you aren't. Right?
Yeah.
And it's about, and the emphasis is actually on what you aren't sometimes more than what you are.
Yeah, but it's all, as I say, that's half of it. The other half is making sure you understand who that can and cannot be accepted by, and that aligns with the values. So, for your example, if you're saying, well, okay, swearing is part of my brand, that's going to happen. That's a touch, some brand element to me, and therefore, but it doesn't matter who's likely to be offended by that, and does that have any real bearing on the success of me delivering a product or service? No, because it's the number of people who are offended by that and wouldn't work with me are small enough and the wrong demographic kind of anyway that it just doesn't matter. You see it in all sorts of things. I mean, it's a weird, and a lot of this stuff is cultural. I saw a really weird argument. I've seen it a couple of times actually. Arguments on LinkedIn about tattoos, about people posting saying I'd never hire anybody who had tattoos, and other people going, well, what are you talking about? Why does it matter? What is it?
Does the fact I have tattoos on my wrists? Those who are listening to the audio, who aren't looking at my screen, does that actually stop me doing my job? I don't think so. But No.
So it doesn't, these are, a lot of these things are just, they are, but the most important stuff is that when we think about our values, or whatever these things are, whether they're cultural things like swearing or tattoos, or whether they're just ways of being, or stuff like being enthusiastic or being passionate, or those sorts of slightly more nebulous things, it's just about reminding that this does need to be accepted by somebody, because to have a meaning. Because one person, I'm quite an extrovert personality. I talk quite a lot. I can be quite, I can be a bit much to some people. And so I can sit there and go, I'm passionate. And that's a very, very positive thing, to be passionate and extrovert and communicative and all things. It's very positive. But if someone finds me annoying, it doesn't, all of those values, I can think they're positive, but somebody else can just go, I can't stand that guy. He's just too full on, too much. And I don't want to work with someone. I just don't like him, don't get on with him. So values are only what can be accepted to have meaning. And I saw I saw a very interesting thing the other day, that when we think about brand values, actually the worst values are those very universal things, because they are something that anyone would say. So they are not helpful in defining us in any way. So, I mean, the classic one is people say, my values are that I am honest and professional. And you go, okay, everybody's going to say that. And no one would ever say, I'm dishonest and an amateur. and expect to get
I'm
paid
going
for
to
what they
charge you lots of money for nothing.
Yes, I'm gonna. Yeah, I'm a complete amateur and very unprofessional, and I'd like £200 of your money, please. So obviously, that's values in being communicated meaninglessly. And actually, the important way to look at values is to say, I need to think of values where a perfectly competent, able, good competitor would say the exact opposite and be as positive as I am, because that's when you really find values that actually can define you. So, you could find, for example, a marketer who says, I think logic, performance-based marketing is the most important thing in the world, and you should really be doing a lot of that stuff in your marketing. And that's true. And it is helpful. But I'm the complete opposite. I'm the guy who's going to say, I think we spend too much time thinking about logic and performance. And I think there's a world of psychological marketing that can be done that can add a load of stuff to your brand. Now, both those things can be true at the same time. There's no right or wrong about any of it.
Well, there's a reason why
But it does help you define one brand from the other very, very clearly.
And there's a reason why we call marketing an art and a science. When we're talking about the science, we're talking about the data and the analytical side of it. When we talk about the art, we're kind of talking about psychology, really. Making stuff look nice, making stuff sound nice, look nice, etc. We're talking about the art element, right? I think the best...
I'm going to slightly challenge that, only on one sense, because there is... I mean, people talk about magic and people talk about the psychological aspects being kind of the magic. And, you look at things like, I say to people, it's the difference between Derren Brown and Obi-Wan Kenobi. It would be nice if we could all sit there and go, these are the products and services that you're looking for in a Kenobi style, and people just buy our stuff. Wouldn't that be lovely? That's kind of magic. That's not what psychology is. That's not what Derren Brown does. And as much as we think of it as art and magic, it's not fluffy because there is science behind it. The psychology is a science, and so it is, but it's the science of emotion and how to work with that.
Yeah. And I think it's about balancing the best of both worlds, right? I think it's about making sure that, again, you come across authentically to yourself, because then you can't get it wrong. Because if you're authentic to yourself, you're not. What is there to get wrong? It's you. But also, I think the kind of always seeing opportunities, and this is what jumped to mind to me, was the concept of like, I don't see anyone as a competitor because they're not going to do it as I would do it. And it's this abundant mindset shift around, because there's two mindsets, right? Scarcity and abundance. Scarcity is, I have a job, oh my god, there's nothing else there, there's only one job, right? Abundance is, there is a job, there is an opportunity, there is also another, there is also another, there is also another, there is also another. And what I try to do with coaching clients, and what I talk about in content a lot, is switching into abundance as quickly and as well as you can, because it then means there's less pressure on that one transaction, because you're like...
there's a famous quote about this that which I think is what you're referring to, which is, every abundance creates a new scarcity. So that's a constantly just shifting pattern that... and that which can lead on, because actually that is used a lot in reference to artificial intelligence and what artificial intelligence is going to do to us, that actually people worry that, well, artificial intelligence is just going to create such an abundance, but that in itself will create new scarcities that provide opportunities. And that's always been the way that technology, just taking it slightly wider than AI, that's what technology has traditionally done in human history. Technology has allowed people to actually create better economic situations. So, example, people used to work in the fields as farm hands. Then we invented tractors, and everybody didn't need to work, combine harvesters, and everybody didn't need to work in the fields. But what, as a result, was that we were able to collect more stuff that needed processing, so the jobs moved out of the fields into the factories. They were better skilled, and people got paid more because they were more valuable. So technology's fine as long as the abundance it creates and the scarcity that is then created results in better outcomes for people, better standards of living. The danger in the future is that goes over a tipping point, and you go, okay, now either there aren't the jobs that are, the new scarcities that are being created don't require better paid jobs for the humans to move to, or they just don't require any jobs at all, because then you've got a much more difficult societal problem to solve.
Which is a beautiful segue onto Chat AI. So it's as if we planned this. That would be fun, wouldn't it? Imagine if we did that. And I think, for me, though, because I had a conversation when Chat AI exploded and it was a big talking point in the industry. It was like, there was a percentage of copywriters that were like, well, I'm out of a job. That's fun. Sorry, guys, that's not true. Chat AI is good. It's going to get really good. And it's the worst it's ever been as of the time you're watching this video. Great, fantastic. However, what I don't think it's ever going to be able to do, and I might disregard this as a statement later on down the line as we see it progresses, right? It's a saying from a completely novice point of view. However, I don't think it's ever going to be able to actually have the element of emotion that skilled writers can add into content is the key. But I think what it can do is actually make a writer's job easier, because it can build the skeleton for you, and it can build the rough plan and etc. But you still have to come up with the idea, and then you have to go and edit it, right? Is that from your perspective how you see AI writing take in the market?
I think so. There's 2 points here. The first is, yes, fundamentally, I think you're right in as much as there are things that an AI can learn to sort of mimic humans from a large language model, which is what they're all currently kind of based on. But there's a whole other set of human kind of nuance and empathy and qualities like that are much harder for an AI to learn. So it can regurgitate. It can, an AI can read, the complete works of Shakespeare in a fraction of a second, and then give you some kind of approximation of, and then you can ask it and say, well, what if William Shakespeare had written Harry Potter? What would that sound like? And the AI can go, cool, let me just read all of Harry Potter, all of Shakespeare, and then I can just shove you out something that feels like a reasonable approximation. That's easy. That's what a large language model can do. But if you said to a large language model, how would you talk, or how would you, let's just say, communicate in words? So it's a chat device. How would you communicate to someone who is happy versus someone who is angry? And how are you going to talk to them differently? A large language model is going to go, well, hang on, let me look up a ton of like happy people references and a ton of angry people references and then try and approximate that. It's not going to do that, because that's stuff that is experience based and emotion based. So that's the stuff that, and so to answer the second part of your question is, writers who are scared of ChatGPT, I think are tacitly saying, I'm writing a lot of stuff that doesn't have a great deal of value. That's not necessarily their fault, because they're getting paid by clients to write what clients want. We have an earlier problem to solve, which is, why are we filling the internet with quite so much crap that we're asking people to write, such that they feel threatened by something that can write it faster? And that is an important thing for people to understand. And in fact, I would, if it's possible, Carlton, I read a really, really interesting article called the other day, which if it's possible, we can include the link to a Substack article for people to go and watch. Let's go and read. It was an article called "The Bitter End of Content," and it was a really brilliant dissection about, how did we get here? How did we get to a point where we have an internet which is so cluttered with really, really low value content? And again, I am going to go back and blame, well, two things. Firstly, an internet that is largely funded by advertising. And secondly, the algorithms and what the rules that the algorithms create. Because I'm sure you, like me, have seen, and the listeners will have seen, is enormous amounts of things like, YouTube videos where people go, do you know what, the sweet spot of YouTube content is a video that's 10 to 15 minutes long. Therefore, everybody makes 15-minute long videos, whether the thing they've actually got to talk about is worthy of 15 minutes worth of time. So what you just get is an enormous amount of padding. And also that thing of, they need to watch, and people have got to watch 75% of the video for you to kind of get the algorithmic tick in the box. So what do? You can't put all your good stuff at the beginning of the video. You've got to keep it all back till the end. So basically, you've got to stuff 6 minutes of round the houses into the beginning of a YouTube video when actually you've only got 7 minutes of stuff worth to say. And that's how we just get drivel content.
I mean, it's completely right in the perspective that it comes from the advertising principle, especially on YouTube. For those who don't know, to educate the audience, it's because of pre-roll ads, mid-roll ads, and the ability to be able to basically put 4 ads in a video, which is going to be ridiculously more profitable for you than the pre-roll that you get passively, right? Now, should you, when we're also in a world where there's edited inside ads in the content as well as pre-roll, post-edited ads on top of that, it's getting a little bit too much, if you ask me. However, that's all subjective regarding value, audience targeting, etc., etc., etc. I don't, as an advertiser, this is why we're in an attention economy and why the attention is more important than time or money. Because if you command the attention, you can gain time, which in turn means you can gain money.
Yes, but what this article suggests is that there is fundamentally, if you continue with that sort of race to the bottom of content, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and you're scraping. There's a great phrase in it, something about scraping moments of attention for fractions of a pence at a time, and that there's a fragmentation there that is just fundamentally not good for people. It's not good for users. And so as much as we talk about an attention economy, there are some signs that at least a certain number of people are starting to rebel against that. And they're saying, I understand in an attention economy that if I'm not the client, then I'm the product. And so I'm not going to look at these free resources like YouTube, where actually I'm just being productized, that I'd rather find a really good channel provider, and I'll subscribe, and I'm going to go to Patreon, and that's the person whose content I want, and we can completely reframe the transaction arrangement and the value proposition by saying to them, look, don't feel you've got to put this on YouTube, don't feel you've got to earn your money from the advertisers. I want to subscribe to your content. I will pay you directly, and you feel free to just give me the value that I want in the way that you can do it. And then if you want to make a 2-minute video or 15-minute video, either is fine.
Yeah. And I think the interesting shift that will potentially happen in the next, I'm going to say 3 to 5 years, probably knowing the internet, it'll be 2 years, is going to be actually we move from a attention economy to a value-led attention economy. Now, they're different, right? One is, how much content can I put out in regards to volume, no matter the quality of the content, which is where we're at right now, which is just sheer numbers, sheer volume, sheer bulk. We saw this with short-form content, etc., etc., etc. However, the people who are also thinking very strategically around the value in regards to the words and the topics and what they come across and how they come across in respect to the articulation of what they're talking about and making sure that's actually valuable and not just fluff, which is where a lot of people get it wrong, in my opinion, in my experience. Neither of us in this boat, but from what I've seen, that's where I think the ones that will rise to the top, because there's going to be, I would probably say, a culling at some point soon, where the ones who can't sustain the value proposition that they have, whatever that may be, in their target area, is gonna fall off, is my opinion. From as in, we'll start seeing the social media algorithms prioritize whatever metric they will see value led, probably watch time, to be honest, more than like shares, comments, etc. And we'll hopefully see a more, I guess, supported level in regards to the like we're already starting to see it, right? This was to an extent what NFTs were meant to be, what Patreon that you've already alluded to is, etc. These kind of like crowdfunding-esque ways to fund so that a curator like myself, like yourself, doesn't need to rely on necessarily the advertising that we're going to put beside our content or etc.
Yeah.
Like, of course, we're a little bit different because we're commercial entities, so everything we do from an content point of view is kind of a passive ad for what we do as well. But for those who are sole curators like YouTubers, for example, they are solely reliant on, we got a sponsor, cool, we can pay the production cost.
Yeah.
We got some good ads.
There's a couple of really, really big, and these are almost kind of scary big kind of directions that technology and humanity can go in. I mean, and one of you touched on one of them when you mentioned NFTs, because that's something that really, I think people don't really understand what we're trying to get to with NFTs. The NFTs in their current form are, you know, they're worthless. This is a very, very immature space, but the potential usages of them are huge, but we haven't got there yet. We don't have the technology to do it yet. But fundamentally, NFTs and blockchain that sits behind it are fundamentally a choice between a libertarian world and a regulated world, in exactly the same way that some people believe in free markets and some people believe in socialism. So it's not really all that different. It's just that the world that we have created thus far has largely been built on gatekeepers who are the guardians of various forms of trust. Banks, for example, central, you know, both banks, commercial banks, but also, you know, central banks. If I've got a £10 note, you know, the Bank of England says that's worth £10.
Well, let's remember,
and it's not just a worthless piece of paper. That's the trust that gatekeeper adds to that. Whereas if you strip all that away and you say, well, we don't need any of this stuff, blockchain effectively is a new form of trust. That means that all of these gatekeepers who are all skimming off a percentage for their little part in the chain, we just don't need them. And all of the value can simply go from any individual A to any individual B. You can see why, on the one hand, that's a very attractive proposition to a lot of people. And you can see a lot of good that could be done with that. But you can also, at the same time, see how that could become quite chaotic. And overwhelmingly, when everything is an individual transaction and there's no kind of central point to anything, how do you keep on top of that? So, you know, all of this is the problem with all of these technologies is we don't really, sadly, have these kind of nuanced conversations at the moment because we're all too busy going, I bought an NFT for £50,000 and now I've sold it for £70,000. Woo, woo, woo. You know, so, and that's the thing is there's always people, early adopters racing ahead. Again, you know, kind of jumping on what the algorithms are kind of set up to do, which is just talk about the quick wins, the here and nows, the instant, you know, sort of, you know, exciting stuff, and not kind of talk about the boring stuff, but the far more profound stuff, which is how does this all change the world and how we interact with each other and stuff. But, you know, the more nuanced stuff, the older you get, Carlton, the more interest you get in the nuanced stuff. I'm getting old, so I'm nearly 50, so I'm starting to get interested in all that sort of stuff, and I wasn't when I was 25.
What's wrong with me? I'm 25 and I only care about nuance. What is going on? And just as an initial point, like, let's not forget what a £10 note was traditionally. I owe you this amount of money. That's what a £10 note, what, £5 note, £50 note, £100 note, whatever. Yeah. That's what it was. That's what you're saying to a bank. When you give it money, you're going, it's an IOU. That is what it is, right?
Yeah.
So all we're seeing with the advent of smart contracts, I completely agree with everything you're saying with smart contracts, will be an IOU digitized. That's basically what we're talking about.
But the best, I mean, the way I described it, and I hope, but hopefully this might be useful. I think it's a valid analogy, but I think it does explain the potential of NFTs better, is simply the personalized pound coin. You know, at the moment, you give someone a pound change transaction, here's your pound change, every pound is the same. But if you could literally say to someone, look, this is your individual pound coin between you and me, and at some point in the future, I might want to offer some stuff here in the shop at a big discount. And so I want you to be one of the people who can have that. So at that point in time, this pound coin is going to go ding, and it's going to say to you, Tom, if you come in the shop and spend this pound coin today, you're going to be able to buy £10 worth of stuff for that £1 coin. How amazing is that? And that's just an offer for you, and only this pound coin will allow you to do it. That's what an NFT can be. It is a personalized token that blockchain allows to be able to do those sorts of transaction with, in a way that loyalty cards that we have these days are a kind of very blunt version of that, and money, fiat currency, is an even more blunter version of that. So it's just a next iteration of kind of currency.
Yeah. And I think it's really important to see how one can leverage technology. As I say, I think the most attention one can get, as I say, I think we are going to go into a value-based economy more than just purely attention, numbers for the sake of numbers point of view. But I think, as I say, the nuance and the reason why it's important, the reason why I reiterate it, is the shift from social graphs to interest graphs, because it's something that we've literally, it's because of TikTok is why, but it's happening across every platform. Whether you like it, whether you subscribe to it, whether you enjoy it or not, it's happening. Right? The big corporations that run these algorithms politely don't care. They want a certain thing, which is people to stay on the platform so they can put more advertising down your throat. In turn, they can then get paid. That's why.
And that's, we will start to, unfortunately, society is all, in many ways these days, dividing along various lines. And I think that is one of the next points of polarization, will be people who will accept the kind of the algorithmic world, and people who reject it. Because I can tell you, I'm certainly on the side of the kind of people who are now rejecting that stuff, and going, I see what it is, and I have no hate for it. I have no, if people love it and people want to use it, that's absolutely fine. But I don't want my world to be manipulated like that. I don't want these feeds to tell me what to look at. I want to find I want to retain the inquisitiveness of my own mind. And I want to be able, that to be the way that I find out information and go on journeys and disappear down rabbit holes of stuff. The sort of thing you click around Wikipedia, get all sorts of interesting directions. But when you've got an algorithm going, no, you read this, now you will read this, then you will read that. I don't want that. I don't want to be told to do that, and that's fundamentally what an interest graph algo is going to do.
Could do is what I'll say from my view. I think it can do that. I think also you need to remember your.
Why would it not do that?
No. That's why I say it could do. It's to actually that, and the reason why I'm pro it, which is an interesting conversation because you're against it, I'm pro it. The reason why I'm pro it is it gives the control back to the user, and it's the greatest equalizer of all time that we've had in forever. And ever as a creator point of view, which I've kind of discussed in other content and earlier in this podcast. But the reason why I said it from a consumer point of view that's powerful is because if you don't want to see more of X, stop consuming it, go and look on the same platform. I'll use TikTok as an example, but other platforms are available. Go and look manually, search for something else, give that watch time, give that interaction, close the app, reopen it, you'll be served that thing instead of the previous thing.
I mean, it's interesting to see, again, this goes to a behavior point of view, what people will and won't do, because I love Twitter, and I've always used Twitter quite a lot. And so many people say, oh, I hate Twitter because it's just a load of stuff I don't want to see. And I'm like, you can very easily curate what you see. Why aren't you just taking the simple actions to curate the information? Oh, I can't be bothered with all that. And you go, well, you see, here's the problem. The ability, the tools are not the issue. The issue is that there's something about this experience that we want it to be on rails. We want it to just be fed to us because that's kind of how we've been conditioned. And so, there's a behavioural, sort of thing to overcome.
Because it takes effort to actually go and search for something, right? And it takes effort to go out of the way to create the feeders so it would be valuable, right?
But the entire point of the algorithm is you don't need to do that because this is an interest graph. We know what you want, and we're just going to serve it up for you. So you don't need to do anything. To then say to people, oh, well, if you want to change that, there's a load of stuff you've got to do. Do you know, see how those two
100%,
things
but we're talking from a privileged point of view where we understand how the algorithm works. The average person just opens TikTok and goes, that's a funny video, let's watch that. Look, a cat's appeared, oh good, etc.
And one of the things that I don't, even at my level of understanding of these things, I am constantly surprised by what people show they have a desire to do and interact with and receive as value. I read a really interesting article. There's a really interesting article with Guardian a couple of weeks ago about scams and how people are willingly engaging and spending money on things that are pretty overtly scams, and they don't mind. And the reason they don't mind is because they feel they got value out of it even when they were scammed, because if nothing else, it gave them something to react to and talk about. And to them, that's value.
But
so you've got,
this is where it's interesting, and this is where I think if we go into a value-led attention economy, where it gets really, really interesting, because value is so subjective and so down to you. Because we can both sit here and watch the same piece of content, and I'll go, that's incredible, that's incredibly valuable. But then you might go, I hate it. Why is this? I don't understand. I'm like, well, this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. But the very nature, but the thing is it's always the time. It's what we've got to, as brands, to be connective. What we have to do is constantly be alive to psychologically unusual things, like, you mean you can actually scam to people and they can actually welcome it and enjoy it.
Enjoy losing their money.
That can be completely illogical. But then when you look at it and you go, well, why are reaction videos so popular? Why is it that people want to see someone else reacting to something and watch it? Millions and millions of people feel that's something they really, really want to spend time watching. I mean, what it suggests is people are worried about forming their own, or they're worried about their own reactions to things, and they go, well, I don't think this makes sense. So what I need to do is I need to see someone else reacting, and then that will teach me something about how I should be. That's what reaction videos do fundamentally. They don't do anything else.
Yeah, I think it comes back to the tribal being accepted as part of the tribe thing, and also another idea that jumped to mind was, why does makeup sales increase in a recession? Right, like when the economy gets harder, why does makeup and entertainment things on average go up in regards to how much people spend on them? It's because we want to be distracted, or we want to find some level of enjoyment from these things. Gaming culture was the same in COVID. Everyone was locked in their homes. What the hell do we do? Oh, I know. Let's play video games, explore into another world where I don't need to worry about the reality of the planet right now.
Yes, yeah. And there's much of human behavior, much of behavioral science is actually about saying, a lot of what we create as brands is trying to create things that are perfect, create incredible value, amazing experiences, and position it all in those terms. But that's not what people actually want. What people want is things that aren't bad. There's a famous phrase. This is a famous IBM advertising strapline from the 70s that went, "No one ever got fired for buying IBM." That's incredibly clever strapline, because it actually speaks to how people actually think. If you're the purchasing manager for an IT company and somebody says, go and buy us a whole bunch of new PCs, what are you going to do? Are you going to try and buy the very best possible PCs, even though they're very pricey, but they're like the best of the best of the best? No, because if it goes wrong, you're getting fired. Whereas if you spend less on PCs that may not be as flashy, but are very unlikely to go wrong, the chances are you're not getting fired. Or if something goes wrong, you're going to be able to justify, well, the consequences are not going to be so severe. And that is the stuff that dictates our behavior.
Yeah.
So often the time, as brands, again, a lot of the work that I do with brands is trying to make them see things this way. And because a lot of time people are like, I want to be really, really premium. I want to be the best of the best. And I want to be this. And I'm going, you don't need to be, and you don't want to be, and you won't sell as much if you try and be. Because it's not how people think.
Yeah, it's the concept of done is better than perfect, right? Because the thing is, perfect is this thing that you should constantly chase. I agree. Excellence is something you should always chase. Yes. However, actually just getting it done and actually executing on the idea. If I sat here going, how do I make the best perfect podcast ever? I would still be on episode 1 because I would never have executed on the concept. I didn't. I started, and then there we go. I'm now episode 130. I've so much so I've stopped counting because the number doesn't matter. And
I mean, look at things like a great example is the discount supermarkets, the Aldi and Lidl.
Yep.
At one point in time, they were perceived as being rubbish, and therefore they didn't have a huge market share. All they had to do, they didn't try and reinvent themselves as good as Waitrose and suddenly go, oh, let's go premium and quality, which a lot of people might have reacted that way, going, oh, people think we're rubbish, so what we need to do is be really great. But actually, no, all you needed to be was not quite that rubbish.
Yes, you needed to be the
so as soon as you raised the perception, so you could stay cheap, but as soon as you just raised the value proposition a little bit, it became well, I know they're not as good as Waitrose, but they're close enough, and they're a lot cheaper. And all of a sudden, and then as soon as they got that bit right, then they became the market leaders.
Yeah, and I think it's a really important point to end on. So thank you so much for the time. For those who've really enjoyed this conversation, they want to connect with you, they want to have that conversation, whether that's about working with you, just getting to know you, etc. Where is best to do that? Where's best to reach out, etc.?
You will find me on a daily basis chatting away probably on either LinkedIn or Twitter. So it's at Sufu Marketing on Twitter, or search Sufu Marketing or Tom Hadley, and you'll find me on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. And a final piece of advice for those who are looking to enter the branding world in this exciting opportunity-filled economy, what would you say, Tom?
I would say just stay open-minded. The biggest thing that I try and do on a daily basis is not think in terms of right and wrong. But as you say, Carlton, it's all about aligning, with a certain set of people. There's always an audience out there. It is about finding that alignment. Try not to see things as black and white and right or wrong.
Thank you for coming back, ladies and gents. I hope you took value from this episode. If you did, I would love to know what you think in the comment section down below.
Teach me something.
Why not be subscribed so you don't miss next week's interview? And I'll see you very, very soon. Accepted as part of the tribe thing, and also the another analogy that jumped to mind was, why does makeup sales increase in a recession? Right? Like when the economy gets harder, why does makeup and entertainment things on average go up in regards to how much people spend on them? It's because we want to be distracted, or we want to find some level of enjoyment from these things. Gaming culture was the same in COVID. Everyone was locked in their homes. What the hell do we do? Oh, I know. Let's play video games, explore into another world where I don't need to worry about the reality of the planet right now.
Yes, yeah. And there's much of human behavior, much of behavioral science is actually about saying, a lot of what we create as brands is trying to create things that are perfect, create incredible value, amazing experiences, and position it all in those terms. But that's not what people actually want. What people want is things that aren't bad. There's a famous phrase. This is a famous IBM advertising strapline from the 70s that went, "No one ever got fired for buying IBM." That's incredibly clever strapline, because it actually speaks to how people actually think. If you're the purchasing manager for an IT company and somebody says, go and buy us a whole bunch of new PCs, what are you going to do? Are you going to try and buy the very best possible PCs, even though they're very pricey, but they're like the best of the best of the best? No, because if it goes wrong, you're getting fired. Whereas if you spend less on PCs that may not be as flashy, but are very unlikely to go wrong, the chances are you're not getting fired. Or if something goes wrong, you're going to be able to justify, well, the consequences are not going to be so severe. And that is the stuff that dictates our behavior. So often the time there's brands, again, often the time, a lot of the work that I do with brands is trying to make them see things this way. And because a lot of the time people are like, I want to be really, really premium. I want to be the best of the best. And I want to be this. And I'm going, you don't need to be, and you don't want to be, and you won't sell as much if you try and be. Because it's not how people think.
Yeah, it's the concept of done is better than perfect, right? Because the thing is, perfect is this thing that you should constantly chase. I agree. Excellence is something you should always chase. Yes. However, actually just getting it done and actually executing on the idea. If I sat here going, how do I make the best perfect podcast ever? I would still be on episode 1 because I would never have executed on the concept. I didn't. I started, and then there we go. I'm now episode 130. I've so much so I've stopped counting because the number doesn't matter. And
I mean, look at things like a great example is the discount supermarkets, the Aldi and Lidl.
Yep.
At one point in time, they were perceived as being rubbish, and therefore they didn't have a huge market share. All they had to do, they didn't try and reinvent themselves as good as Waitrose and suddenly go, oh, let's go premium and quality, which a lot of people might have reacted that way, going, oh, people think we're rubbish, so what we need to do is be really great. But actually, no, all you needed to be was not quite that rubbish.
Yes, you needed to be the
so as soon as you raise the perception, so you could stay cheap, but as soon as you just raised the value proposition a little bit, it became well, I know they're not as good as Waitrose, but they're close enough, and they're a lot cheaper. And all of a sudden, and then as soon as they got that bit right, then they became the market leaders.
Yeah, and I think it's a really important point to end on. So thank you so much for the time. For those who've really enjoyed this conversation, they want to connect with you, they want to have that conversation, whether that's about working with you, just getting to know you, etc. Where is best to do that? Where's best to reach out, etc.?
You will find me on a daily basis chatting away probably on either LinkedIn or Twitter. So it's at Sufu Marketing on Twitter, or search Sufu Marketing or Tom Hadley, and you'll find me on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. And a final piece of advice for those who are looking to enter the branding world in this exciting opportunity-filled economy, what would you say, Tom?
I would say just stay open-minded. The biggest thing that I try and do on a daily basis is not think in terms of right and wrong. But as you say, Carlton, it's all about aligning, with a certain set of people. There's always an audience out there. It is about finding that alignment. Try not to see things as black and white and right or wrong.
Thank you for coming back, ladies and gents. I hope you took value from this episode. If you did, I'd love to know what you think in the comment section down below. Why not be subscribed so you don't miss next week's interview? And I'll see you very, very soon.